Hello and welcome to the Superior Comics Show, the number 4 pop culture podcast in Ireland. Don't ask me how many pop culture podcasts are in Ireland. There's 4. So today on the show, I have Matt Sumo and Pete Collins, the writers of the indie book, The Bardic Verses. So I'm gonna let the guys introduce themselves there because I'm probably awful and any American listeners probably can't understand me anyway.
I'm Pete. Like this dude, I have a great name. It happens. I'm the artist on all 66 sequential pages of the book and some of the remaining 20 or so pages of back matter.
I'm Matt. I'm the writer of the Bardic Verses. We kind of co-created it together, Pete and I. I wrote all 66 pages of of the Bardic Verses and approximately 0% of the back matter in the book, and the rest of the book. So that's kind of where we let our contributors have some fun.
So you were there in spirit, though.
Yeah,
it's true.
Look, the Bardic Verses it's up on Kickstarter now. I'll pop a link on YouTube. I'll have a scroll along the bottom if you're listening to this on Spotify or anything else. The link will be in the description. But it's been funded. It's fully funded. There's 17 days to go, I believe, still on it if you want to get your hands on a copy. But congratulations.
Thanks. And today we just updated the campaign for a stretch goal. So that was fun. That was fun.
So what is this stretch goal? Come on, get people excited.
You want
yeah. So yeah, it's for we're gonna upgrade all the physical copies to hardcover. And it's pretty modest. We only need an additional $1,200 to do that, which is pretty cool. So we've been talking about, we were going to do the book initially in a hardcover, but we really wanted to keep the campaign as low as possible, keep it as modest as possible, just to keep a low barrier of entry, just to make sure that we do reach funding. To be honest, I did not expect to be funded as quickly as we were. I think it was pretty surprising. So I just kind of said, hey, why don't we look back into doing hardcovers again? Because again, the Kickstarter is really, to be honest, about the book. It's not about us. Pete and I are not taking a page rate for this book. The cost, the funds that we're trying to raise are going specifically to production and printing, and that's it. We have to pay our letterer because, of course, if you're producing a comic book, pay the money for a good letterer, and we have a good letterer, Matt Krotzer, and just we wanted to make the book as good as possible. So it's going to be a quality book as it is, even if we somehow don't meet that stretch goal, which I really hope we do. The book is going to be great quality. But we really wanted to, when we initially were talking about this book, we wanted it to be a hardcover in the onset. But had decided against it and just kind of had that in our back pocket just in case. But yeah, we wanted to be as great looking on a shelf as it is when you're reading it. So ideally, hardcover is where we want to go.
Yeah, 100% see that. Anyone who's listening, get onto it, because hardcovers, as you mentioned, look so much better on the shelf.
Oh yeah,
just something about the sheen and even the feel of it when you're taking it off the shelf, just the weight of the hardcover as well. Just you're holding something special.
Yep.
So was this your first Kickstarter campaign?
It's my first. It's my first everything, actually. It's the first time I've drawn a full-fledged project. I've participated in a pinup to another anthology, a wrestling anthology that was called Kayfabe Volume 3. I did a very, tongue-in-cheek type of pinup for a wrestling event featuring 2 old men at a retirement community, which was went over well.
That was the Superstar Showdown, right?
Superstar. That is good. But yeah, this is my first thing. This is my first thing. Matt's the veteran here for sure.
Just to clarify, it's my first like solo Kickstarter. I've been a part of like anthologies that were on Kickstarter. My first like work for hire book was kind of on Kickstarter. Like we got paid for the book, and the book was going to come out, but we used Kickstarter as like a pre-order method, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, this is the first one that like I'm running on my own, and it's been challenging is the word I want to use. Stressful. It overall, it's been great. It's been cool to kind of see the other side. To do like I have friends, creator friends that launch Kickstarters all the time, like it's nothing. And launching this one, I feel like we were like not really comfortable with launching it until maybe like 2 weeks before. And we've been working on this book for over a year at this point. But it was a lot of math. There was a lot of like stressing out. Again, a lot of like paring it down as much as possible. But it's good. I mean, it's nice to be involved in that. Like seeing it from this end has been interesting and eye-opening.
I can imagine. Like my own one, I set up and I jumped the gun, and I was surprised I got as far as I did. I jumped the gun, got too excited, and set up the Kickstarter before it was 100% ready to be set up. Like, and then I go and see the likes of your Kickstarter page. I'm like, they have so much more detail and so much more everything than I had on mine.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I think that's the benefit we had is like, we were, we weren't trying to put anything out too quickly. We had nothing but time over the last year. I think a lot of people probably had a lot of time, but, with me and Matt, it was like, we were in constant communication all the time. I'm sending snippets of art. He's sending me, ideas. We're ping-ponging off of each other in a lot of ways. And it was just, it became like this gradual thing. Like, I never set any time aside I have to do my art between 4 and 6 every day or anything like that. So it was super casual. And we, I was a little antsy, I think, to get the Kickstarter thing up. I think Matt was the level-headed one a little bit as far as like getting it on. And sometimes still too, like I feel like I don't have enough done. Like, cause I know I have 10 pages or so I have to draw still. And Matt's like, Pete, calm down. We don't need to have it up right now. Like, we set our own terms and our own releases and everything. And which is comforting. It keeps me from being a total spaz. And so it's approaching it from a casual perspective and just putting up what you can, I think, is what's important. You don't have to give away the whole farm, but as long as you have a few things up that are enticing, I think that's really enough.
I think it must be an artist thing. My artist is the exact same. She's constantly on to me saying, "I'm so sorry, I don't have this," and I'm like, yeah. I would be like you, Matt. I'm like, calm down, relax. Don't burn yourself out. Just, we're all good. Like, I'm doing the lettering myself. I know you said about hiring a good letterer. I have a small background in graphic design, so I was like, I'm gonna do the lettering myself and see how it works out. So far, I'm happy with it, but now I'm getting into that artist mindset myself. I'm like, I have 2 pages she sent me across. I haven't lettered yet.
Yeah, it sometimes a letterist can make or break a page. So it's especially if you start getting into like the more artistic things where you've got like a big sprawling sound effect and you have like a drawing inside of it or something. Yeah. Like it really is an art on its in and of itself. And I don't think I had an appreciation for that until the first time I got some stuff back, and I saw it and I was like, I didn't leave enough room here. I forced a bubble into a corner because he didn't have anywhere else to go. And there's some of that, and it's a dance to balance all that. So It is art.
It is, and like my artist has the same thing with the letter, and she's talking about, did I leave you enough space here? She's sending me one picture, one page, and then she sent me a draft of the page with like red circles to show me where she thinks the dialogue can go. Oh,
Yeah.
sure, Matt as well can agree with this. As a writer, I didn't really think about how it would fit on the page while I was first writing it. It was only kind of as I was sending it over, I was like, I have like 12 panels on one page. I need to space this out a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's crazy to think, like, we don't know. I don't know about you, but like, I mean, I guess you're lettering, so you probably have a better idea of like how many words are going to fit in whatever bubble you're going to put on the page, like, and so on. For me, like, that doesn't enter my mind. Like, I kind of know like a little bit, but I don't really foresee that visually until Pete draws the panel, and then I'm like, all right, like, if I'm reading through the script, technically this should go here, here, and here. And the beauty of like how Pete works is his work is like 110% digital, so he can make adjustments on the fly. He doesn't do traditional art, so it's not work. He's not like drawing a page on an 11 by 17 paper and then like having to go in and do adjustments by like whiting out stuff. Like he literally just goes into, he has like assets that he uses if he needs, or he can just go in and like literally shift the panel down a little bit if we need to add room for whatever. So that's been like kind of helpful to know that we can kind of make those adjustments on the fly. But yeah, I don't think that way. I don't like look at like when I'm doing a script, I'm like, I kind of know in the back of my head, like maybe, this isn't the time for like a soliloquy, but like, sometimes you gotta have a monologue somewhere. So you get creative with how you do that, like whether it's entirely in caption boxes, or you do like a page with less panels and just fill it up with word balloons. It's tricky. Making comics is real tricky.
Oh yeah,
as you know.
it's my first
It's
one.
kind of
Like, and as you were saying there, this is my first time lettering a comic. I've done lettering on posters and things like that. My first time lettering a comic, and let me tell you, my writer mindset and my letterer mindset are two completely different things, and they hate each other. But
That's fun.
like I wrote it, like my one's 22 pages, just a single issue, and I went back and there's so many changes and adjustments, especially when the art came in, and then I was doing the lettering. 66 pages is, that's amazing to go through, especially for the first one you're running by yourself. Like, was it stressful, or is writing something you really enjoy and you just wanted to sit down and keep writing?
I've said this before to like other people, is that I think, but it's so true. I'll say it here too. This has been such a great collaboration between Matt and myself that I feel like it may have ruined any future collaborations for me, because it's like, he'll hand me his script and it's dialogue. It's very his focus is dialogue, and it's got things that he wants in there, but it's very loose and it's open to interpretation. So it lets me do what I feel should be done, and and then as soon as I finish a page, or even sometimes beforehand, I get giddy and I just send it over. And if there's something he thinks like, hey, that looks weird, or can we do this? Like, I can do a quick adjustment before I get too far into it. And but it's super flexible, and it's I know that I'm afforded the ability to do what I feel is necessary based on what he's written. And sometimes that flexibility means, hey, you said 6 panels here, I made 5. Hey, you said 5 panels here, I made 6. Just to bounce out some things. And it's I think that's important. Like, I don't have a real basic comparison, but I think it's important to maintain that that true collaboration effort, where it's like, here's a script and some suggestions, and here's the art. What do you think can change? And to bounce off each other is, I think it produces the best result you can possibly put together. And sometimes that's hard, but I guess, but for us, it's no problem.
Yeah, I basically, like, I handed Pete the script and I was like, listen, like, this is kind of a loose outline. Like, I'm not married to anything on the page other than the dialogue and like where we kind of need the story to go. If you want to like blow something out, throw in an extra page or whatever. Like there was a moment in the book, I think we initially wrote it as one panel, it became an entire page. It's by far and away my favorite moment in the book. We haven't shown anybody really. We've shown some creator friends of ours what it looked like, and they got a pretty positive response. But it's not on the Kickstarter anywhere. It's something we're kind of saving for when the book is printed. But I told Pete, like, it's easier for me to write around what you're doing than it is for you to draw like around or like make big sweeping changes in the pages. So like if you have to blow something out, like don't worry about me. I'll just go back in, and if I have to like rearrange some dialogue or like do something differently based on what you're doing in the background or what you're doing with the characters and the scene, like I don't mind doing that. That takes me little to no effort, like you're doing the heavy lifting. The artist does the heavy lifting. So like, please, like whatever I can do to make your job easier, like let's just do it. And again, like,
sorry,
go
I
ahead.
didn't mean to cut over you there, Matt.
No worries.
I feel like you guys are like the more experienced version of exactly what I'm doing. It's like, listen, I told my artist Amy, she's Scottish, so like the accent's scary anyway. But I basically told her, I was like, I sent her the script like you said, and said, go nuts, just go nuts. You are the creative one. I do the writing, you do the art, you bring it to life. And she's done an amazing job, although she made one of my big bads devilishly handsome, which I don't know how to feel about that. But yeah, it's that relationship you guys have, like you said there, like Pete was saying there, like when you have such a good relationship, do you imagine or do you get a bit anxious thinking about any kind of future projects with someone else rather than each other?
I think I know Pete. I can speak for Pete. He definitely does. Me, I to be honest, like I've been a part of some challenging projects. I won't name names, but where it was like, it's so any good like work for hire gig, like you're going to be reporting to an editor, and like, they're pretty vicious. Like they just go in there and chop until it's like, sometimes it's less than, what you had initially contributed or whatever. So I'm not really like afraid of that. Like, again, for us, dude, like as writers, we do the easy part, I guess. It's all hard, but like we're not the ones sweating over a tablet or sweating over a 11 by 17 page, like, worrying about like wrist issues and back issues, like sitting like huddled over a table or a drawing desk. Like we're just on our computers. Like that's what I do for a living, and like at my day job. So it's really not that big of a deal. So I'm not really afraid. And to be honest, like my goal for this book, and I said this is public knowledge, I've said this pretty much everywhere. My goal for this book is to get Pete like to work with other creators and to get his work out there, because I've done this. This is not my first rodeo. And I told him when he did the pinup for Kayfabe, when he first got that, like when he held that printed copy in his hand, like he's gonna get the bug. And sure enough, he got that printed copy, he got the bug, and we like instantly started talking about like what other stuff we wanted to work on. And we, the Bardic Verses was born through that. Like I just want to see him like do more work, because he has a gift, right? Like his drawing is incredible. It's only grown since we started. I feel like if you have a gift that good, like you owe it not even just to like other people, but you owe it to yourself to use it. Like we really only get one shot at being alive, and like why not use that to like do the stuff you want to do? I didn't mean to bring the room down, but it's true. Like all I ever wanted to do in life was write, so like that's what I did. Like I just wrote, and like eventually stuff happens, like. And I feel the same for Pete. Like he should use that gift. He should use that thing that he likes doing, and just keep doing it.
100% agree. 100% agree with you there. But I find Pete might disagree with me. I find a lot of artists are us writers. We can be very kind of introverted folk when we get into our zone. I find artists sometimes they do need a bit of the bit of backup. They can be very hard on themselves, and like a lot of artists
Oh,
I know a few can struggle for a bit of belief in themselves, and they're very critical of their own work.
oh yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where like you spend so much time, taking a concept and trying to make it, substantial, I guess, where it's like it's a thing. And there's artists we all have our limitations as art. Like all artists have their limitations, right? Like, but those limitations can be kind of flexed, right? The more you practice drawing hands, the better you become at drawing hands. The more you practice a manga style, the better your manga style is. Like different things, and there's different sense of appeals. And I think there's you spend so much time practicing your art, and you spend so much time dedicated to whether it's a page, a panel, a pinup, whatever. You dedicate that time to it, and I think it's easy for a lot of artists to fall into that that sense of perfectionism, where it needs to meet your quality standards. And which, by the way, for my day job, I work in quality assurance, so I am like extra hard on myself sometimes. And it's so much so that throughout the course of this book, right, I draw in different styles. Every song that Martel, our main character, plays while he's in this tavern is a story, and each story is done in a different artistic style. I channel Frank Miller, some Ry Bleifeld. That's less of an homage and more of a parody, honestly. Some Bill Watterson, and some others, and some Walt Disney style animation, and it's one of the things that happened to me was while I was doing that, I went back and I looked at the first two and a half, 3 pages, and I didn't like them anymore. My style had evolved from like picking up the good and the bad from these other people I was trying to, mimic or harness. And I actually went back and I redid those pages, and, I didn't have to. Like, I could have just let it lie. And like, they still looked good, but they didn't look where I had evolved into, so I think that's a perfect example of like that artistic professionalism, perfectionism, coming out saying, you can do this better, now go do it right.
Yeah.
And it's that forced discipline, I guess, ultimately that drives a lot of artists to have some negative perceptions over what they're doing. It is par for the course, unfortunately.
Yeah, like you said there, like with myself and Matt, now I might be underselling us here a bit, and if I am, I apologize. When we read over our stuff and we don't like something, all we're doing is pressing a button and just getting rid of a few like sentences and then just redoing it easily. But when an artist decides that they don't like this piece of work, that could be like hours to days more work put on top of redoing it, and I can only imagine how stressful it is.
What's interesting is this book I'm doing digitally, right? Like, I've got my iPad, my Apple Pencil, and all the bells and whistles there. And that was really the primary reason I decided, this is the approach, is because of the ease. I can take it with me. If I draw something and I don't like it, I hit the back button a few times. I can shift and resize things, restructure them. That was all very appealing. But the other thing is, if you saw the stack of papers that I have in the corner of my bedroom with the rest of my art supplies of pictures that over the last, we'll say 10 years, that I started and never finished, it's kind of shameful. Like, how many trees gave their lives just so I could not finish a drawing and keep it in a pile in my bedroom. It's and this was just, I guess, so that there's a little bit of a economic and ecological, I guess, reason behind going to the tablet. Save the trees, save my money, and the tablet pays for itself in a year, I guess, or two. So
I've brought the conversation down to the serious level of comic creating. So let's get on to what we're here to talk about. I just want to kind of get opinions on you guys on the independent comic creating scene. But now let's talk about the Bardic Verses. What is it all about?
So, as Pete mentioned before, it is about Martil Swordhand, who is a bard. He happens to come from a long line of famous warriors, prolific warriors. His father was a warrior, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, etc. And he's not that, right? He decided to pick up a lute instead of a sword. He decided to be a songwriter, a musician, a storyteller, instead of, doing the cool stuff, right? Like, killing dragons and going on cool adventures. Like, he's the guy in the back with the notebook writing stuff down, like taking notes. And it's about him like dealing with that, right? Like dealing with the fact that people look at him and all they see is his father. Like, they just say, like, why didn't you pursue that? Like, it's in your blood, it's your family. Like, you're like a disgrace to your own family name by not like following in your father's footsteps. So basically the framing device in the book it's essentially an anthology, sort of. Martillon is in a tavern playing a set list of songs or stories or verses, as we call them. As Pete said, each verse is a story illustrated in a different style. We're basically following Martillon around on his various adventures. I use that term loosely because he's not the one doing the cool stuff. He's kind of solving problems in his own way. But we find out these are all, while they're self-contained stories, they do all connect. This is all kind of one long journey that brought him to that bar that he happens to be playing at. There's a reason why he's there. We find that out over the course of the book, and we kind of end the book with why he's there and what happens after that. So it's kind of cool, again, like his anthology style, where he's telling these stories. It's kind of a tribute to anthologies. Most like new comic creators now in the indie scene as it is right now, a lot of them cut their teeth on anthologies. I've been included in a bunch of anthologies. Pete made his start in an anthology, so we really kind of like that format. We wanted to, this book is kind of our tribute to that, along with being a tribute to the artists that he mentioned: Frank Miller, Bill Watterson, Rob Liefeld, and just comics and sword and sorcery books in general, and D&D to a lesser extent. Pete's our resident D&D player. We kind of got this idea because he explained that bards were like a lesser used character, because again, they're not fun and flashy or exciting. They're just they're almost like the comic relief for like an NPC almost. Like, they don't do the cool stuff. And I wanted to take a character that was not used as well and make him cool, and not necessarily cool, but like use him to a fun extent to tell a story, again, about like an underdog, having to deal with that, having to rectify, being known as lesser than, because he didn't follow in his own father's footsteps. But yeah, that's essentially the book, all 66 pages of it.
The very new spin on the medieval fantasy kind of storyline, as you're saying, a very lesser used character.
Yeah, I think there's so many stories about, like, the hedge knight, or the paladin, or the young wizard who's trying to become like his mentor. There's all these different things, like, and there's not a lot of stories about the bard, and I feel that character, the character itself, in the terms of like Dungeons and Dragons, for example, right? It is a storyteller that inspires, right? But the character in and of themselves isn't really inspirational, right? I mean, the stats are kind of meh. Their perks or the abilities that they're afforded as a playable class in the game, meh. Meanwhile, other people are, attacking 5 times around, throwing fireballs, raising the dead, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. What does the bard do? Playing a song to try and boost your morale. awesome.
Well, look, here
Awesome.
in Ireland, the people that play the songs are the legends. So, it's definitely a book that I'm looking forward to sinking my teeth into.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm looking forward to getting your feedback from it when you do.
Well, like as you mentioned there, it's came a lot from D&D, and I know from reading up about it, the Witcher series as well was where you got some of your inspiration. So tell me a bit more about that. The Witcher series, I'm guessing, would be a very important and beloved series to both of you.
Yes. So, I mean, we started talking about this like right around the time the Netflix show came on. And I just love the Bard character. Like I love I'm big into the comic relief. Like, and I just thought that character was like, super funny. Like the song is an earworm. Toss a coin to your Witcher, just like buried into my head, and I couldn't get it out of my head for like months after. But again, like it's about, you know, I wanted more about this character. I wanted to know more. So, we created this character to do just that, like to give like flesh out a Bard character, to give him things to do, and sort of talk about what it's like to be that character. He kind of went through a lot of the same stuff that our character goes through, just like getting looked down upon for being a Bard. So we brought a lot of that to the book, and I think it's it's a fun book, and I think honestly, and I don't use this lightly, but there's nothing like our book out there right now for sure. Yeah, I can't
That's
think
the
of anything.
that's the
Yeah.
goal, kind of, when for a creative, I guess, is to put something out there that isn't already out there. Let's give the people something new that it'd be difficult to compare to something else.
Yeah, I think that was the most appealing part of all of this. Was like we're making something that feels special and can't really find anything that's too comparable. And I can't think of another artist that drew in this many different styles in the course of the amount of pages that were given. And I think there's some trends now where I think it's become maybe a little bit more out there. What's that image book? Crossover. Crossover had like a couple of dips and dives into like some different art styles. It's a great book, but that came out like after we had brainstormed this and like after we kind of put thought to it. So it was like, okay, we still have something here. Like we still have this art, this uniqueness where we can pull in just other inspirations and artistically one person. And there's been a number of times I think someone's asked about like the book and they're like, oh, who are all the artists? And to me that's like the best comment I could possibly get, because it's like it's just me. It's just I'm drawing it, I'm coloring it. That's awesome. That's awesome for people to be like, who are all the artists? High praise. My job is done.
That is, I'm sure it is the biggest compliment you can get. Like, see all these different art styles in one book. My natural reaction would be to say, "Jesus, how many artists do they have working on this?" Especially for like that. Does that Kickstarter budget low? It looks to be missing a zero at the end. There, for that many artists.
Yeah, we've been getting that reaction quite a bit.
Like and so is the Bardic Verses now? Is this just kind of a one-off graphic novel, or is there potential to spin out, or am I?
We don't know.
Is it okay?
I mean, it's not a secret necessarily, but and now I guess we can say like it's funded. So provided everything goes well with the end of the campaign, there has been talks about a volume 2. I can't say like what it would look like story wise, because for spoiler's sake, but we've workshopped like ideas of what it would be like. We do want to do like sort of the same framing, like with him telling his stories in a bar and doing like the anthology style, but it's going to be more, I think, laser focused, whereas before it was kind of like a bunch of different styles. This is kind of be more, I think, more genre based. It's going to be more like horror, so we're going to do some horror tributes in there. Walking Dead, Junji Ito, There's been some
Scooby-Doo.
What's that?
Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, look, yeah, Scooby-Doo. For
You can't
sure.
do horror without having a Scooby-Doo crossover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like Supernatural did it. Like, why can't we do it?
Ascot on one person in this series. It's a waste.
So yeah, I think that there are talks about it. Again, this is all hinging on if we end the campaign fully funded and those funds transfer and we're able to print the book and ship the book. There will be a volume 2, I think, following for sure.
Nice, you heard it. Everyone heard it here. The link to the Kickstarter's in the description here to wherever you're listening or watching. Get onto it because get this one that there is going to be a volume 2, and I'm excited for it, especially now you mentioned the horror and to see how many different styles P can make out of that. And if next time I have he's on the show, if he still has all his hair,
it's I gotta helmet this thing in place just to look all right.
So the volume 1 complete writing wise and almost complete art wise and fully funded now, other than, as you mentioned, the possible pitfalls of funding falling through or people backing out, which I know myself can be quite stressful when you're getting to like the last day or two because there's no time then to build that funding back up.
Yeah.
But let's just go with the positives and the best case scenario that all the money goes through, it's funded, it's out there. How does it feel now if we take away the potential risk of people backing out, which I don't think they will? How does it feel to have it funded and to have this out there? Matt, your own project, Pete, your first project run with Matt and going to run just as the artist on a Kickstarter. How does it feel, or has it set in yet?
Amazing. It feels amazing. You know, this was a dance I meant to come to a long time ago, and I put my, artistic dreams to the side because I had kids at a young age. I needed to get a good job, right? Like that was an instant priority. And they're older now, so I get to kind of slip back into what I have wanted to do for a long time. So, this is to be able to show them definitively now that they're older, that at the end of the day, I was able to go back and do this. I was able to go back to my dream, and it's okay to have a dream, but if you have to put it aside, you have to go back to it. That's a valuable lesson to them, I think. And, ensuring absolute funding and getting physical copies printed and delivered and hearing people say that they loved it. That's all I could ask for.
And for me, it's pretty surreal. Again, like this being my first foray into Kickstarter, like that whole, wondering what the support is going to look like, are people that I'm friends with going to back this, other creators are going to be behind it. The support has been like beyond what I thought what it could be. I mean, again, we were confident in the book going into this, but there were people that supported the book that I never expected to support the book, and especially in the ways that they did, and being so kind about it has been really cool. And it's been real, I guess, like affirming for me that writing comics is still a thing that I could do. So I had a series that I worked on that the publisher ended up folding. I was able to get 5 issues out of the deal in a trade, which is cool. But the publisher folded, and kind of after that, I didn't really know. I was kind of lost. Like, where do I go next? I was working on a couple things here and there, but this is the first thing that I really owned from start to finish. So it's cool to really put something out that's 110% me, and not something that I was work for hire or a short anthology piece. This is 66 pages of Pete and I, you know what I mean? It's again, the most unfiltered version of us that we could possibly get. And not a lot of people that that working comics really get to do that. Like some people get wrapped up in doing work for the big two, and at that time, like you have to answer to editors, and sometimes if you're doing like license work, you have to answer to the licensors, etc. Like Kickstarter is really cool, a real cool avenue for creators to put their work out. Especially like since COVID, it's only grown considerably. Like so many more people are using it now than they were using it before. But yeah, I mean, it's been real cool. Again, like we still have a little bit of a ways to go, but to be funded like this quickly with something that we stressed out about for a much longer time than it took for this to fund is really cool. It's nice to like I still stress out about it, but I don't stress out about it as much as I was like the first couple of days of the campaign. I was on Kickstarter every 5 minutes. Do we get another backer? Like, I have like Hootsuite scheduling my tweets out. Like how many more tweets do I need to send? Like, I don't think about that as much, but it's still there.
It is that's the curse of running it. As the constant checks the first few days, just to see. You mentioned there, Matt, the big two, and all the stuff that's come out recently about how they treat creators of, like, when it comes to movies and rights and stuff like that. The question I'm kind of planning on asking anyone I have on here is it still a dream to work for the big two, or are people looking? Would you prefer to stay independent?
That's a great question. I think it always will be, right? Like, you're kidding yourself if like an editor from DC or Marvel, like whatever your preferred publisher is, reached out and they said, like, we want you to write or draw your favorite character. I don't think anyone would ever say no. But I do think that it's different. Everybody should know going into it that that's not where you're gonna make your money in comics. You know what I mean? Like you're better off, like you'll have more success monetarily and otherwise, like working on your own projects. But I don't think anyone would necessarily turn it down. But it's not like it's not the end all be all. It's not the end destination. I guess we can for people that are into wrestling, that may listen to your podcast and watch it, we can kind of compare it to WWE, right? Like WWE isn't the end all be all anymore. That's kind of like the big two, right? Like you don't necessarily, like, yeah, I think any wrestler, any indie wrestler would love to work a WrestleMania, or be a WWE superstar just to say that they were, but like it's not the only place to go, and it's not the only place to make your mark in the business. So I think it's just changed. But I think as a creator, I would for sure, absolutely, any day of the week, like, would go right for them. But I don't think, I would know what to expect, I think, at this point. Whereas like years prior, like no one knew what to expect. They thought like, oh, if I create a character and they, use it in a movie or a video game, like I'll be a millionaire. It's like, nope, that's never going to happen. Like you're going to know going into it, what the terms of your contract are and all that stuff. But yeah, I think it's not it's not ultimately like where I'd want to go, but I wouldn't turn it down if they offered it.
What about yourself, Pete?
Matt hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think 6 months ago, if you had asked me that question, I would have been like, of course. Like, why wouldn't I? Over the last year though, I didn't really fund anything on Kickstarter like until the pandemic, and then it's like, okay, I'm seeing some stuff. I want to fund these people who are now struggling in some cases, or like just trying to get out there. And I was seeing some really eye-catching stuff, and it was as those things started to arrive in the mail, it was clear, like, indie comics wasn't really like something I put any attention to beforehand. Like, for me, it was the big 2 or 3, if you want to go consider Image or some of the Image comics wrapped up in that, right? And I think I found that, you know, there is a high quality to the art and to the storytelling that's available out there that doesn't even go anywhere near those companies, and it's accessible. And I think over the last 6 months specifically, I think my tastes have kind of evolved. You know, it's no more I'm buying the same comic titles I bought when I was 15. You know, it's you know, they get repetitious. There's only so many big, all new, all shocking changes you can tolerate in within one set continuity. Or, you know, it has been a breath of fresh air to dive into this community and to talk with some of the people, right? Like we've got a little group on Twitter that we, you know, chat with sometimes, and it's awesome. People I never would have talked to without diving and immersing myself into our project and into this community. So would I, if I was offered the opportunity? Probably, but I'd only probably take it now for exposure.
Yeah.
You know, get that name out there, right? Because X-Men's going to outsell most indie comics, right? Like it's the way that the world is built at the moment. So if given the opportunity, yeah, I'd take it. I'd give it my all so that I can make a name for myself. And then immediately afterward, when I launched my own thing or I'm jumping onto another indie project, I'm bringing that many more people with me. You know, I think nowadays that's the only reason I do it.
I definitely agree with both what you both said. Kind of, if it came around for the likes of exposure or for the likes of kind of personal love of a character, or and just being able to say it, done it, would be amazing. But money wise, and like kind of like it's you're better off, as Matt said, you're better off on the indie scene.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll clarify too. Like, if my career in comics were to end like right after this book comes out, I wouldn't call myself a failure. I think maybe a couple of years ago I would have, because I'd be like, you never got to write Batman, or you never got to write Spider-Man. Like, now I'm at a place where I could look back on what I've done even up until now, which isn't that much, but I can look back and be satisfied because it's stuff that I wanted to do. And it's my voice is in all these things. You know what I mean? Like, it again, like it's hard enough like to do comics. It's even harder to do work for the big two. So like just doing what we're doing, all three of us, like that's pretty big. And like I feel like, it should be commended. Like we should be commended for what we've done so far. Because some people, the sad truth about reality, again, not to bring it down, I don't know where this is coming from today, but the sad truth about reality is like a lot of people don't pursue like the stuff that they want to do, for like what Pete said, like he had to raise a family at a young age, so he had to put drawing aside. And some people don't ever put it back, like bring it back to the forefront, because they're like, they get too wrapped up in other things, and that's like what we're doing is things that we've always wanted to do. And I'm sure I speak for you when I say that. This has been a dream of mine since I was old enough to write. I always wanted to write comics, and like now that I was fortunate enough to do it on a couple different projects, like I wouldn't be upset if I didn't write for the big two. And I think that's important. And it's interesting, that the landscape has changed in that way, where that's not the end all be all.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, it was weird. I always loved writing as a kid, and I always loved comics, but for some reason I never put I got to use an American metaphor. I never put my peanut butter and my jelly together for whatever reason. Then eventually the pandemic came in, and I had all this time in my hands. Well, once the toddler went to bed, I had all this 2 hours on my hand if I wanted to get a good night's sleep, and I was looking through comics. I was like, there's still a lot of Irish stereotypes in comics. Way too many. Why isn't there an Irish character who's not a stereotype? I was like, I'll write one.
Yeah.
That's all it takes, man. Like sometimes you just got to take it into your own hands, right? Like
It's the weird places the inspiration comes from. I'm sure both of you are the same. I'm sure you both got random pieces of inspiration from the most non-inspiring places.
yeah, it's true.
Going with the indie stuff, actually, I don't know if you've looked much into it. I haven't looked too much into it, but there's a lot of positive and negative talk about Substack going around.
Yeah, so I've heard a couple of different things. I think overall, I think it's good. It's a good thing for creators, for these, like your Scott Snyders, your Donny Cates, your Jeff Lemire's. Like it's good for them to like get whatever money they're offering them. I think the model, like the Substack model, is not. It doesn't make sense in the long run because they don't own the stuff that these creators are putting out. Like they have to, as far as I know, they get paid. The creators get paid like a lump sum, and they have to produce X amount of newsletters. But whatever they put out, like these comics or whatever that they're putting out, they don't like Substack doesn't own it. Once they're done, once their contract is up, they can take these works that they're producing like on their exclusive Substacks and just go publish them somewhere else. So I don't think it's I'm trying to think of the word that I want to use, but I don't think it's like viable. It's not long term. If for some reason if Substack maybe got into like publishing, like whether it's like a digital platform or publishing actual like physical copies, I think then it would be a viable option, or it would be a good way for them to make that money back. But I really feel like, honestly, and this could change, I feel like once those deals are up, like those creators are just going to go back to doing what they were doing before. Because again, there's no reason not to. I don't see how Substack makes that money back without owning like the rights to those books or something, but apparently that's not the case.
It feels almost like it. Now, I'm sure it's been in development for a while, but to me, it almost felt like from the news that about Marvel and DC paying creators next to nothing when their storylines or characters are used in movies, that news dropped, and it seemed like Substack then just came out of the woodwork, kind of like, oh, we're doing this for creators. I know, I'm sure it's been around a long time, and that was just my exposure, but it just felt like so in sync, the two events.
Yeah, the timing was definitely weird. But again, like, I mean, they're offering up all this money, but how are they making it back? You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand that math. And maybe they don't, and they just fold. But I don't know. Like, without owning that content explicitly, like it just seems strange to me.
From what I understand about it, it's they claim, I think it was like a 10 or 11% commission on sales. So it's like, but like the printing or publishing of it is free. So it's like you have a company that has big name, artists, writers, like they're definitely getting a nice roster together, and they're printing for free, and then they're claiming a 10% commission on all sales. So it's like, first and foremost, how much are the books, right? Because if it's a $6 single issue, okay, that's a little much. Maybe that equates to something in the long term, but if you're selling presumably let's say $4 book, right? Their 10% is 40 cents, right? So that's nothing. That's absolutely nothing. And they're probably not going to sell a few million copies a piece. So it's like, if creators don't have to pay for printing and you're absorbing that, at at the most, it's absorbing the costs. It balances out in some way. So I don't understand how they're making money when under that model at all. Like it sounds like bad math. It really does. It sounds gimmicky, you know, like when I use a perfect example, right? Like there's video game consoles that come out like every few years, right? You know, the Wii, when the Wii came out, it sounded weird. It sounded gimmicky. It lasted a few years, but ultimately it was on to something else afterward. Something that had better graphics, was better refined, and, you know, different. So like to me, I view this as it's a gimmick type thing. It'll stick around for a little while. It'll probably struggle to make ends meet. Ultimately, the creators are going to take their properties and walk if they're allowed to, and then on to the next gimmicky thing.
Yeah, it's a strange one, all right, but I brought the conversation down to more serious note again, which anyone who is a consistent listener to the show is kind of going, parenthood has changed him, because the shows are never this serious. But yeah, I won't keep this for too much longer, but I'm gonna end it all on a positive question and something to get the listeners who are thinking about getting into comics going. I want to know what it is that got you guys interested in comics, like at the start, at your very base, what first brought you into the comics world?
For me, I mean, like, it was a combination of things. Like, it was, you know, my parents would be like out somewhere and they would like see a comic book and just bring it home. Like, I couldn't tell you what my first comic book was, because I got so many like just random ones, whether it was like Archie, like some random issue of Spider-Man, some random issue of Batman, X-Men, etc. But what really got me into wanting to write them was Ultimate Spider-Man. Brian Bendis's Ultimate Spider-Man. Again, like it's such a great take on Spider-Man, such a great update of the character, and he had characters like his dialogue like sounded like real dialogue. It wasn't like that sort of like hokey comic book dialogue. I think I recall reading a story. He would just like he would commute by train and just sit and listen to people talk. And then just like that would inform like how his characters sounded. They all sounded different. And, you know, that sort of really kind of unlocked my brain and wanted to be like, oh, I want to do this. Like, I want to make characters that sound like me and my friends or, you know, my parents or people that I know, like to make it more realistic, because it just makes it that much more fun of a read. And then, you know, as they say, like I worked on one and then the rest was history.
Before Pete gets into his answer, that's actually funny. The books that got you into and interested in writing comics were actually my first ever comic books.
Really?
Yeah, in 2000, I think it was, my grandmother brought me home Ultimate Spider-Man #1. So I was 6 at the time, and my obsession just started there. Like I said, Bendis' writing was something else, and to this day, Ultimate Spider-Man is the one comic that has made me cry. With, I'm sure you know this, the storyline, the death of Peter Parker. Just yeah,
it's real good.
Yeah, it'll be so. Yeah, that's my little bit of nostalgia. But this show today isn't about me. So Pete,
you got tissues there, Peter? It's gonna get emotional. So in the early 90s, I had my grandparents had retired, soft retirement. They decided that they were going to open up a hobby shop. It was mostly baseball cards, basketball cards, and sports memorabilia and that sort of thing. But they had 2 spinner racks, and this was, of course, in the 90s, where, you know, you've got like the X-Men's hot, Spider-Man's hot, Images coming into its own. So, you know, I always drew, but that was a different time, right? Like that's when like the art style of comics was evolving, you know, at that period. So I would spend some time in their little hobby shop, and I'd get comic books, and that, you know, that really triggered it for me. One thing, and I've told that story a few times, but there's another element to it that I want to add that I've never told anybody. Not anybody in relation to like any interviews we've done or talks with other creators or whatever. So fast forward, both my grandparents have passed. They passed years and years ago. My oldest son, Nathan, had a really hard time reading at a young age. It didn't click. He didn't like it. He couldn't get into it. So one of the things that I did was I dug up, all my comics that I could. He loves Spider-Man. I would give him to him as much as he could tolerate, right? So he's seeing these pictures. It's making him read. 60s and 70s Stan on Spider-Man was a huge hit, and that kind of helped him turn the tide. So much so that we went out of our way to hold on one second. For his 13th birthday, they took him to meet Stan.
Nice.
And for his 17th birthday, they took him to meet Stan. And that it became a different thing then. What started out as an interest for me and piqued my artistic nature, also kind of also led my son down a path of catching up with his academics, understanding his, how to read better, how to write better. He graduated high honors. That's awesome.
Fair play.
And it's all because of Spider-Man. So it's like, to me, that's where my connection to comics is important.
And people still to this day try to say comics are just for kids.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah, the people who say comics are just for kids haven't read some of the comics out nowadays.
Yeah,
and it's clearly not the case too. Like, especially now with the advent of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Like that it wouldn't be the phenomenon that it is if it was just for kids. I feel like that notion is quickly going away. It's still prevalent, obviously, but it's not as prevalent as it was before. It's cool to be like into comics now, where like I'm sure I speak for all of us, like when we were growing up, it was not cool to be into comics. Like you said, like people be like, oh, those are for kids, like kids, read that, those are for babies, like, and it's not the case anymore. I think people understand that it's a whole different animal than it was before.
100%. Like when I was a kid, I used to hide my comics in my bag so nobody would see them. Now I strut into the comic shop in Dublin City Centre, live streaming myself on TikTok, showing where I'm going. It's cool to be a comic nerd now. It's the in thing.
It's nice. It's nice to like talk about, like, it's cool to like someone would be like, oh, like come to me, and I know for sure I speak for Pete, but like they'll come to us now and be like, oh, did you see What If, or did you see the latest Marvel movie? Like, how cool was that? Like, oh, you're working on a comic, how cool is that? Like, where years ago this was never ever the case. So it's so much. It is cool to be a geek, but it's nice to not have to hide it.
Yeah.
It's not a dirty little secret. It's like something like people actively like enjoy talking about.
Yeah, it's not a taboo anymore. It's not like you go to people and like, what are you interested in? Oh, I like comic books and comic book movies. Back then it would have been like, years ago, it would have been like, nerd, punch in the stomach, take your money.
Yeah.
Nowadays, like, what are you into? Like comic books, comic book movies. People are like, that's like saying I'm into music. Everyone's into it.
When I went to see Guardians of the Galaxy 2, right, I bumped into somebody that I went to high school with that, was that very stereotypical jock type mentality, like, oh, you like Spider-Man? Effing nerd, like, would just never let you live it down. And I bumped into him there with his like 3, 4, 26, however many damn kids he had. And it's like, and I shot him a look. He's like, hey, how's it going? I'm great, man. Thanks. This is perfect.
Yeah.
little mention right there. Thanks so much. You know,
it's perfect. And there we go. We went from serious notes to a nice little positive note because my Zoom was running out of time again, as usual. But look, I ran out of questions because as many of the great guests I've had on have done, I asked one question. I have two more planned, but you've answered them in the answer to the first question. But in the meantime, the Bardic Verses is on Kickstarter. I'll put the link everywhere I can, wherever I'm posting this. The link will be in the description. And there's 16 days by the time this episode comes out left to get it. This episode to drop on Friday evening. So for a lot of people, it's payday. I know you have the money. Go spend it. And if you're on monthly pay, you're getting paid next week. Just send me a message. I'll set a reminder. I'll message you next week and remind you to do it again. Meantime, lads, if you're looking for any Irish Rebel songs for the Bard to sing in Volume 2, get on to me. I have a few good ones. Just you might alienate your English fan base.
It's fine.
Yeah, look, any closing statements, anything you want to say to the people listening? Go ahead. And if
the Kickstarter is at TBV, so that's the initials of the Bardic Verses, tbvkickstarter.com. And then follow me on social media everywhere, MySpace, Friendster, Match.com, LiveJournal, Dead Journal. It's at Mattman Begins.
And you can find me on most social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, maybe Tumblr, as PAC Illustration. Give a follow or don't. I'm more of a quality over quantity guy.
And on that bombshell, lads, thanks very much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure, and I'm looking forward to reading the Bardic Verses and also get my hands on Volume 2 when it does drop.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Peter.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks a million, lads. Listen, and as those Irish say, sláinte.